And welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're going to be discussing the season finale of Invincible. This was episode number 8, Where I Really Come From. We now know that we are getting 2 more seasons, at least seasons 2 and 3. And Robert Kirkman, in a recent interview, talked about how, he hopes that this thing goes several seasons past that, because he would love to do the entirety of the run, plus add in some extra stuff. This was an amazing episode. There was a particular scene. I didn't cry, but I would be lying if I didn't say that my eyes got a little watery.
Yeah.
It was a very powerful episode. It was a breath of fresh air. This is what I want out of comic book television. This is it. Real consequences, character moments, action. It did everything I wanted. Guys, just your initial reactions. To me, this is a 10 out of 10 kind of episode and season.
Well, you're talking about like the emotional part. You look at, being a dad, all the dad parts of this episode were pulling on my heartstrings because his dad's struggling with it. His dad trying to do obviously what Nolan's doing is not right or acceptable by, I guess, Earth standards. Because
perfectly okay on Viltrum. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's okay somewhere else, but I was verping.
Yeah.
But when you look at how he was struggling, how he's come to terms with being more human, because he's not, but he's adapting, and it's him struggling with it, him struggling with his own identity while trying to help Mark find his. It was a very deep moment that just it didn't feel forced. Like, obviously there's I don't want to say there's no such thing as Viltrumites, because then one started knocking on my door or something, but for it to be a comic book type show and to show that kind of depth in characters was unheard of almost. It was so well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it best, because I was about to say that too, that, it's like this was their only chance of Earth's only chance of beating Omni-Man was to make him human. And his family did do that. And I think I saw an article, like, didn't have time to read it because my life's so busy right now, but I read an article read the title of an article that said, Omni-Man's one weakness was Debbie. And it's like, okay, yeah, that falls a little short, but yeah, it was Debbie and his son and, raising a child and being human and, being outside of this super strict culture that, basically told him you're perfect, everything else is beneath you. And, your role is to domesticate the galaxy, and bring them back into our perfect society. Like, but, and it was such a knockdown, drag out brawl. And this is something that anyone would have a hard time doing and making interesting. We got for the length of the episode, we got it was a fight, and it was a conversation, and to do a fight that long and have it still be entertaining and relevant and, like you said, draw those emotions, Brian, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah, structurally it was great. Kirkman wrote this episode, and we've praised him in the past. He's a great writer. Unfortunately, I wish he could have written every episode of Walking Dead, and maybe it wouldn't have devolved into what it became, but that's a whole other topic. This show, because it's animation and the way, the seasons are structured a little shorter, I'm hoping we'll at least get 1 or 2 episodes a season that he pens himself, and I'm thinking that might be exactly what he's thinking. But the truth about the Viltrumites being that, yes, in fact, they had their own sort of purge on their world where they eliminated what they considered the weak, and then those who remained conquered what they could, and then they got so spread out they came to the conclusion that they needed to rethink their strategy, so they send one Viltrumite to worlds they want to conquer. They weaken them over time, and then the cavalry comes in and they complete the conquest. And he basically says, Mark, that's the way it is. You're Viltrumite, so you're part of this. We're going to continue to weaken this world, and we're going to conquer it. Saying, calling his mother nothing more than a pet. Ooh, that cut deep. But the other major revelation to Mark wasn't just the Viltrumite situation. It was, and this is something that plays big role in the comic. It's how old Mark's going to live. And this is something that he reveals to him. You will be around for thousands of years. You will live a very long time. Nothing alive today on Earth will be there, when you grow old. And so he was basically, like you said, Larry, that idea that we're superior, we're better, we're going to be around a long time. They're ants beneath our feet, basically. And the beatdown he gives Mark and the massacre that he causes is him displaying this to Mark. This is how I view humanity. And before we go into the depths of all of the things he does, what do you guys think about that revelation, especially the living, a long time thing? Like, how would you? That's a lot of weight on Mark's shoulders.
But yeah, because Mark himself, he's still teenager, young adultish. He's 17, 18 years old. And I remember being that young. I've been around a lot of kids that are that age, and it's the bulletproof feeling, even the ones that aren't really bulletproof, like us normal humans. It's crazy to see how little perspective they have on life outside of that very moment. So for him to let him know, like, hey, man, you're going to be around for thousands of years, and none of these people are going to be around anymore. And that kind of realization was very, very hard, because Mark knew, like, he knew that he would outlive a lot of people, but to put it in that kind of perspective, think of even a long-term relationship. Say you get married and you guys celebrate your 50th anniversary, you live together for a long time. He would do that like 30 times. That's hard to kind of put into perspective for somebody.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of thing where he's gonna live this long life, but like you mentioned, Spencer, he's still a teenager, and one big thing he said, and like, I don't know why, and I guess it just kind of shows to some degree how detached Nolan can be. When he told him, he's like, hey, yeah, everything you've ever known in your whole life, none of this matters. He's telling this to his teenage son and trying to explain to him that he's going to live for hundreds of years. And it's just like, well, even if you tell him that at that age, it's like, well, this is his whole world. This is everything he's ever known. And even like he's, I was going to say barely adult, but he's not even an adult yet. And you've told him none of this matters. Our whole life, none of this matters. It's this other thing that I haven't told you anything about, that I haven't shown you, and I want you to go along with this, because I just feel like because you're a Viltrumite, you will. And, like, I think anybody would reject that. But Nolan's clearly been so deeply indoctrinated his whole life that he kind of assumed that it was going to be a given, and, that Mark would be as crass as he is.
The first example, well, after he cuts the immortal in half, we get the death of the pilot. That's the first real shocker. Mark goes, he's doing everything in his power to save this pilot who was in a fighter jet attacking Nolan. And, he gets him down to the ground, and the guy's just like, man, thank you. I thought for a minute there, I didn't think I would make it. And Omni-Man flies down and looks at Mark and basically is like, this is pointless. And he just crushes this dude's skull like it's nothing. And in a sick way, he's trying to teach him, his philosophy, his belief system. He's like, screw these guys. They're nothing. We also get a scene where, I believe they said it was Chicago, where, he throws Mark through some buildings, a whole bunch of people die. Mark's trying to save this woman and her child. They perish. And then the most gruesome scene in the whole episode, and Robert Kirkman said in an interview, that he didn't know he would be able to get away with this. It's in the comic, but not to the extent that we see it. Basically, him holding Mark up and slamming him through a subway train, and him getting this weird POV shot of him brutally crushing and killing everyone on the train. Very gruesome stuff, but he's trying to drill into Mark's head that these are ants, but like I said, ants beneath our feet. They don't matter. And what he doesn't realize is that it's the opposite effect. Mark is
Yeah.
like, you're a monster. These people have lives. You don't value life. Fuck Viltrum. Fuck the Viltrumites.
Well, yeah, instead of trying to win him to his side, he basically just he put in Mark's head what not to be. Instead of trying to get him on board, which is what he was trying to do, he basically is just like, you know what? Fuck you, Dad. And in Mark's defense, we talk about life and everything. He's going to, live these thousands of years. But by him waiting to explain all of that to him, by him letting Debbie have her hand in raising him, I don't know what Nolan expected, because knowing who Debbie was, seeing what decisions Mark already made by going to Mars, doing all these things, it was one of those things where he's like putting off the inevitable, and he just, once it finally happened, he's like, shit, and realized that Mark's not going to be on his side.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things that makes you wonder, because he seems to give all the things he's done, which just kind of make you wonder, like, how long was he on Viltrum before he came to Earth? Because it had to be a much longer period of time for him to be that indoctrinated to value human life that little. It's not the sort of thing where he turned maybe just 40 and then went to Earth, because, well, we know they live a very long time, and he mentioned, Mark, that he'll live for hundreds of years. So who knows if he's had like hundreds of years of indoctrination, and and that's why he views things the way he does, and human life is so small to him. It's like, and I guess at that point, living that long, it would be easy for him to get jaded enough to not realize how long it would take for Mark to have the perspective he has, or if Mark ever was going to. But like you said, Spencer, it's the only thing it seems like he really drilled into his head doing this at this breakneck pace that he did was assure Mark that he's like, okay, yeah, Viltrumites. He probably thinks of Viltrumites as evil now, given what he's experienced, if anything.
So he'd be right in terms of the way they're viewed
100%.
throughout the entire galaxy.
Yeah, and we got a hint
right.
of that too, like later in the episode, towards the end, with Alan and his meet up with him.
Yeah, we get a great line. This was the powerful line. This is in the comic, where he's just like, 500 years from now, what will you have? And, he's like, you, Dad. And we get the flashback. Now, what did you guys think about the baseball flashback? I don't believe that's in the comic.
Yeah.
It's go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that's new. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of, we get it. We're getting to the emotional core, I guess, of Nolan. Why does Nolan leave? Why does he fly off? What hits him? And we get a nice scene where Debbie's talking to him about the importance of being a parent and what the purpose of it is, and being human. And we get a scene.
There's a lot of memes about that too. That just basically what Earth would look like if Mark didn't play that one game of baseball.
Well, that's great. Because yeah, I guess. Or what if he missed?
Yeah.
Yeah, that the Nolan flying, leaving the planet, done beautifully. Very, very similar to what happens in the comic. He does get emotional and he just leaves, and Mark is left there just battered. And of course, he's they recover him and patch him up and everything. But hell of a scene. I know, Spencer, you're a father. I mean, how did it hit?
Well, you go back to the whole the baseball scene, like how proud he was, and even at that point, I they show us some earlier in this season. They also show us quite a bit in the comics that we've read, but to see the effect that uh, being a dad had on Nolan to begin with, it it was such a massive, life changing event that changed who he was as a person. And throughout this season, you can tell what he was dealing with, trying to wrestle his own demons with, like Larry said, the indoctrination of being literally better than everyone else that Nolan, suffers. And to see the effect that Mark had on him, because, being a parent is a good parent will, your kids always come first. And noticing now that he's wrestling with that, no matter how much he was indoctrinated, no matter how old he was, to even seeing the Viltrumites do everything that they've done, throughout his lifetime, and to have, 10 years worth of time with his kid at that time, and now he's 17. So on a blip of, he's probably, 500 years old. 17 years out of 500 years is not a lot, but to see the effect of what that has on him is, it's hard to put into perspective, because it makes you feel different, makes you think different. And seeing how Nolan reacted to those things was very lifelike, because there is no, well, once again, I don't want to piss off any Viltrumites that are hiding, but you have a superhero that is brought back down to reality by his kid. And that's very, it makes it feel more real.
It's a very real thing. Yeah, exactly. And I was going to spoil something major, but it's such a big thing in this series. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But yeah, when that kind of thing is done, and done well, it just really hits. And some people might feel cheated out of getting just a drag out knockdown brawl. I mean, they got that. It was finished. Clearly, Omni-Man won. But the fact that having a family for what you, like you mentioned, Spencer, is a blip in his life. Had that big of an impact on him, that he abandoned these plans that he was possibly making for hundreds of years. And and like you mentioned, Brian, just seeing, like, honestly, after Mark said what he said, like his response to the "what would you have after 500 years" line, and seeing Nolan's, just his physical response to it alone was pretty heavy.
Debbie heard everything, and that reveal to Mark is devastating. They show it to us. She hears him calling her nothing more than a pet, that she's not significant to him in any way. And she has some, emotions. She gets upset a couple times. We see a couple breakdowns. When she gets to the house, she's crying in her room. It's not to the extent that it was in the comic. In the comic, it was a little overboard. I mean, there's a huge chunk of the comic where she's just there. She doesn't say anything. She's devastated. This version of Debbie is a little, I guess, stronger. I guess I'll use that word in terms of, not letting it completely destroy her. We get a scene where she goes to Art, and they talk about it, and she's getting everything off her chest, and she's explaining, she does miss Nolan, how twisted it is. She does miss him. They have a drink together. She's more vocal. She's talking. She's expressing her emotions, not just, catatonic sitting on the couch. I think it's a better version of her dealing with the grief, the way it's done in the show as opposed to the comic. What do you guys? Go ahead.
Well, I will say this: in the comic, didn't it happen a little bit differently? Like, wasn't the situation? No, didn't Nolan tell her this to her face in the comic book?
Yeah, and in the comic, like I said, she's the way that happened with the control room was different. But when I say she's catatonic, I mean she doesn't speak for quite a while.
Well, to me, it's one of those things where she realized, Mark's getting his ass beat this entire time while all these things are being revealed to her. So yes, it bothers her. Yes, it's breaking her heart, but her focus, instead of being on herself at that point, becomes being focused on her child. And we talk about strong characters. It goes from, in the comic books, she's just kind of there, and they're showing the effect that she has on Mark, but they don't really show the effect that everybody else has on her in the comics. And now we get to see both, ends of that coin. And now seeing how strong she has to be for Mark to help continue to put Mark on the right path, because he's going to be just as dangerous as Nolan as far as powers go. So trying to put him on the right path so that he doesn't turn out like Nolan is the role she's trying to take now.
Yeah, and there's that, and like you said, the Debbie stuff was way more interesting in the show. So I hope we get more of that, and we get to explore more of her character in this too. And I think the choice to have Nolan not say that to her directly, in fact, possibly not even know that she's hearing him say that. I think Kirkman felt like, because I felt this way as a reader. I think he felt this made the character feel less human. Just the way that he's kind of chewing out and dogging his wife in the comics. It's just like he just seemed inhuman. Like he was just wearing a mask and there was no humanity to him in the book during that scene. And I think it was a better creative choice to do it this way, because now I'm wondering, like, well, what's going to come of that? What's going to happen? If or when Nolan finds out that Debbie heard these things.
I'm very curious about that exactly, because he's out there, and we'll leave it at that. We get Eve, William, and Amber, all the Mark's little inner circle. Several scenes where they're basically like, yeah, we all know. Amber's now like, yeah, I saw what went down. It sucks. I want to be with you, and he's like, cool. I love the little gag where Eve, they didn't know who she was. She's like, well, I'm Adam Eve, and they're like, they thought she was duplicate. But she's like, I wear pink. They're like, oh yeah. But it was a nice few scenes, basically showing this is Mark's support structure. These are his friends. That's his girlfriend. And going forward, this is his sort of crew. And they had the episode just had a lot of nice balance in terms of what the show is about, Mark being a superhero, but all the things around him as well.
Yeah, the show does a really good job of that, of showing us the, just the extended cast and making you care about those characters, because there's a lot of these characters you just don't care about as much in the book. You care about the superhero stuff, and yeah, the relationships matter, only to the extent that they matter to Mark and your other, your other superhero cast and whatnot. But the show has done a really good job of making you care about these little narratives and stories and hurdles that just kind of the everyday people in Invincible have. Their friends and family.
Yeah, you look at, because all of these people, with the exception of, I don't know, the Mahler twins, everybody else seems to be human. So to show human interaction, how that is affecting Mark, and how he relates more to them than he does his own dad, I think is a important narrative in the story, and making it important like they are is huge to the story overall.
And that's a good point too. We get to see why Mark would prefer humanity to Viltrum, because you get a good understanding of what his life is here and just how connected he is to everybody. and why it's kind of insane that his dad would ask him out of the blue to abandon all this.
Yeah. I mean, going back and this is something I really want to do is rewatch the whole season because I start thinking about certain scenes where they're having certain conversations and Nolan, the expressions on his face, and like I'm thinking more and more about that. Like, he was sort of projecting his disdain for humanity and for various aspects of the world throughout the entire show. And this was just him finally shedding that, facade and being like, look, this is what I think. And you even go back to the whole storyline with Titan where he was just like, that's bullshit. Who cares about them?
Yeah.
And it seemed very cold, and even Debbie's like, what the hell? And now we know he really didn't care. Doesn't care. But yeah, this is a show where those are things I want to go back and really pay attention to how Nolan reacts to certain situations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that was real interesting to see throughout the show. Like you said, the fact that he is crass, that he just really doesn't seem to care about, day-to-day human lives or in general, most humans, to the point where, like, even the ones that have some kind of ability, because they don't stack up to him, he's just like, well, who cares? Like, when the original Guardians of the Globe are killed, even though he did it, he couldn't even fake empathy when talking about the speedster on the team, and he's just like, so that guy goes fast, who can't do that? It shows how crass he is, and you do get to see the little ways that he has become kind of human. Also, the conversation with his tailor and everything, and like where he sort of got 1 foot in one world and one in the other, and it's and like even in the scenes where he's alone, you get to see where he's off to himself, and some of this is kind of hard for him because he's like he's thinking to himself, like, can I keep this family? Like, when he's rehearsing having this talk with Mark, and he seems nervous because he doesn't know how it's going to go down. And the fact when Mark does get his powers, you think because he's fully on board with Viltrumite's mission, you think he would be super excited about that. But if anything, he seems worried. Like, oh no, now I have to do the thing. I'm going to lose all this.
The Guardians of the Globe, when you really look at the team, it's funny seeing them in action. I'm like, it's not the greatest superhero team of all time, the current lineup, but they've come together. They're a team now. They're good. We get the scene with them cleaning up the blood in their base, and Rexplode, somewhat trying to take lead, but we've got the whole robot dynamic, which didn't come up really at all in this episode, outside of the idea of everyone like, look, dude, you're not a machine, you're like a person, so act like one. They've come into their own, and clearly going forward, we're going to see them more cohesive and working together.
Well, yeah, because regardless of what their opinions are of each other, even, you got Rex, who's a bit of a wild card, and Duplicate, who she just feels like, and she doesn't feel like the smartest character. She's just kind of there, but very useful playing her role. And I think that their whole dynamic, the further we get to explore this stuff, I think that you'll also see, we saw it a lot this season, how smart Robot is. And, having a leader like that who can put people in the right places to do the right things is almost as important as some of the powers that those people have. And then you look at, you got Mark and Eve and those people who are still on Earth, what all they're going to be able to do and what their powers are. So you have a pretty good dynamic of superheroes, and they've established that throughout this series, is that the more times Mark gets beat up and tested, the stronger he ends up being. So after losing to his dad, after losing to Battle Beast, like Mark is going to be this super formidable superhero. So I'm really curious as to where the the villains are going to come from, because I know somewhat just from the comics, but it's already changed it up some. So I don't know if that means they're trying to go past the comics or if they're trying to do stuff outside of the scope of the comics. I know that there's a lot of spin-off comics, so it, seeing what capabilities they have to just explore all these other stories now uh, makes me want to watch more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, and it's sort of, I feel like Kirkman felt like he wanted more of a build up with the Guardians in this one, because we've got most of the team here, but we are missing some key members that, were there from day one. And I think he wanted to sort of introduce those later. And and we're at a point where they're just starting to learn to work together as a team. And, it will be interesting to see that growth, when they get a better team dynamic. And, as far as those villains you mentioned, Spencer, I noticed that too, because there was one in particular I was looking for, definitely a major villain, sort of an arch enemy, if you say so, that wasn't there. But with everything that was crammed into the season, I guess you couldn't. And I imagine you'll see characters like the one whose name I'm avoiding just saying right now, a little later on. But they've done a really good job of retooling things, and hopefully, I'm really looking forward to seasons 2 and seasons 3 of seeing what they do and seeing those additional characters added in.
We get several scenes with Cecil, and he's the Nick Fury of this world, and does a great job. I even love the scene in the hallway with Debbie, where he's basically explaining to her that he's going to help out, and that they set up a situation where she'll be taken care of, but he still needs Mark's help. But he feels betrayed and hurt. He's been friends with Nolan for many, like a couple decades, and he this was personal to him as well. Yes, he's sitting there and he's protecting Earth and doing all these things, but this was a friend that betrayed him, and he's got to deal with that as well. We also get the cool scene with the invisible room, which does play a bigger role later. There's a lot of cool. It's like you were saying, Larry. There's certain characters they haven't mentioned that you're like, oh, where are they at? There's certain elements that they give us little teases to. You're like, oh shit, they're gonna do that. Kirkman created a massive world. Like the Invincible world is almost as big as Marvel or DC on its own. And so it's really exciting seeing things like that, and knowing where they're going.
Well, and having them do it in an animated form, to me, it's a smarter way to do it. You look at the DC universe; their animated universe outshines Marvel's animated universe 100 times over. But the live action stuff, they kind of dropped the ball a little bit. But choosing to do this in a animated format, one, I imagine it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to CG somebody getting shoved through a train for 5 minutes. But I think that it's a brilliant way to expand and keep exposing us to new characters. And there's so many characters that I'm looking forward to seeing. Alan the Alien is such a cool character, and being introduced to him early on like this, I think is great, because you're showing that he travels all over the place to basically challenge people. And as strong as he is, shows that there's a lot of other strong races of people out there. And a lot of them want to fight the Viltrumites. And that's kind of setting up a main plot for season 2 already.
We get our ending sequence with Alan the Alien, which was nice. He returns, and basically he's there to warn Mark. He's like, oh shit, there's a Viltrumite on your world. And so Mark, I love, going to the moon with him and setting up a rock for him to sit on, and just like, I got some stuff to tell you. So the assumption is Mark tells him everything that's transpired, the fact that he is the son of a Viltrumite. And Alan is in awe, because he's like, wow, no one has never left their post before. This is unheard of. You're a Viltrumite, and you're not down for the Empire. He's like, that's crazy. He goes into the whole idea of the coalition of planets and this idea, that there's this resistance forming and that, the galaxy hates the Viltrumites. Um, and we're getting all that lore and all that story, which is setting up, bigger things coming down the line. But there's the best part of the whole sequence was the montage where Mark's just like, well, I'm going to finish high school, and we get the cut to all the villains and all the things that have been set up throughout the season that he's going to have to deal with, whether it's the Flaxons, the Mauler twins, the situation on Mars, Titan, Battle Beast. A great sequence, basically saying there's a lot more story to come. What'd you guys think of the way they ended it, especially it being with Alan, who's a major character in the comic? And with the montage, with the setup, knowing that we're getting at least 2 more seasons, hopefully several more. Yeah, how'd y'all feel about all that?
Yeah, that was just like, that is one of those moments like, oh, really? You're going to finish high school with all this going on? Like, it's like, heck, in this version, he may never graduate high school, to be honest. He might just have to be a dropout. But yeah, it's a good setup for future seasons, I think. And, the whole conversation with Alan, which was the thing I was alluding to earlier, shows that, there is a greater conflict. And like one thing I love about the book and seems to hold true for the show is like, these little dialogues, him mentioning the conflicts with the Viltrumites and everything. Like in the book, lines like that are not throwaway things. You're gonna touch on everything that's said, any big conflict. The Flaxen thing wasn't as minor as it seemed in the previous first episodes. We got several episodes of them combating the Flaxens, and it had a pretty decent impact on the show. So like every plot line that in other books would just be a throwaway thing. In fact, the creator might have forgotten about. Kirkman weaves those things in pretty well, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he does it in the show.
I concur. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I look at Alan the Alien, and I mean we know what kind of role he plays in the future in the comics, but we're talking about weaving in plot lines. But the way that the montage ended, had it not got picked up for another season, which would have been, God, it would have pissed me off and made me sad. But this would have been a decent kind of origin story and just been like, you know what? Where do they go from here? And because it tied up a lot of the stuff, but it still showed what is to come. So, like, if it didn't get picked up, you would have been like, oh, well, what happened with Nolan? What happened with this? But it's set up a good enough storyline where, yes, you hope for more, but I didn't feel, I don't know, I didn't feel a sense of
A lack of closure.
Yeah, because everything, even though Nolan got away, you saw what he was dealing with and why he ran. The whole montage of all the bad guys, to me it reminded me of like the ending of The Wire, where a lot of the stories are they're showing a lot of stories continuing, but a lot of those stories don't end happy. And that's kind of what this was doing, is showing you that no matter what all he did, there's still so many stories still going on, whether he was there or not. And to me, it was a great season finale. Unfortunately, it didn't have to be a series finale, but I think that it still would have worked had it been a series finale.
I see what you're saying, especially with the montage, but this would have been me bitching for 40 minutes had this not got picked up for more seasons. I would have been so mad.
I would have been mad
but
as
I
hell.
think that I'm not saying I wouldn't have been mad. I'm just saying that the way that they did it made it to where I still had closure. I would have been mad just because I've read the comics and I want to see more, but I wouldn't have been mad because I felt unfinished.
Well, yeah, and I think, yeah, exactly. The season felt complete. It felt complete, and it gave you enough closure. Crises were averted, and like you're saying, Spencer, which I don't know because I still haven't seen The Wire. It's very much a ending of, well, life goes on. There will always be these conflicts. You're always going to have these things to deal with.
I mean, yeah, it was a complete arc in that, the arc was twofold. It was will Mark become a superhero like his father, and why did Nolan kill the Guardians? Those were sort of your two big story arcs, and they were both resolved. We know exactly why he killed the Guardians, and we have our answer to Mark. He will be a superhero. He will be invincible, and the fact that he was willing to die for Earth, and he showed that. Proved himself to Cecil and to several others. So yes, it did. In fact, I agree, but I would have still been livid and complaining nonstop had it not got picked up.
Yeah, same here. Because it's like it did feel very complete, and I'd feel the same way. I think if I'd never read the book. That said, after watching this season and finding out that it didn't get picked up, if that happened, I would have read through all the graphic novels, and then I would have been even angrier that it didn't get picked up.
Well, yeah, and we talk about the chances that some of these shitty shows get in something that was so good if it wouldn't have got an additional season or two, which it got more, so that's good. But
I'd have been like, fuck Loki, fuck Marvel, fuck Flash. Yeah, I'd have been mad.
I don't know. There's like 14 seasons of Arrow, so
I've only seen
over.
I think four of them.
Dude, during COVID, I tried to catch up and like watch all of them, and it was
the one I've considered.
It wasn't good.
Like Heroes of Tomorrow or Legends of Tomorrow? Yeah, that's the one I've considered. Like, you know what? I might go back and watch it. I never did. I watched Flash. I watched Arrow. That's the one I've considered several times, and I've just not done it. But,
same here.
But yeah, to me, this is the pinnacle. This is up there with, when you say what is the greatest comic book television programs. To me, things like I thought Daredevil was above many. Obviously, Batman the animated series is top tier. That's the peak of what you could achieve. This is in that same conversation for me personally. This is up there. This is one of the best things I've seen in terms of comic book to television.
Well, yeah, and I'm a little bit of a cynic, and I don't know how to phrase this, so I'm probably saying it wrong or stating a contradiction here, but kind of an optimistic cynic or a hopeful one. It's like, I don't think things will go well, but I hope they will.
I don't know if I'm very optimistic cynic.
So I forget
good. That does describe you, actually.
Well, yeah, and my thought is here, like, this gives me hope that I'm scared to have is the thing, because if we can get this, if we can get Invincible, and if it can be done this well, then my next thought, and I've had it a few times and pushed it to the back of my mind, is like, can we get a saga series that's this good? Can we get
why not?
Can we get an animated saga or live action even, but most likely animated?
Animated
would be
very.
It's so weird. You have to go animated.
Well, there's so many different races of God. That would be a nightmare.
Planets and different races of beings.
Invincible is something we've talked. What's insane about it? We talked about this many years ago. Like, wow, this would be a great animated series. And the fact that it exists is mind blowing. I think something else I would like to see is maybe if we're going to do animation, like Hellboy, BPRD, like give them a legit run in animation. Now we've had the films, I'm aware of those, but no, I want an ongoing show, And when I say films, I mean I also know they were animated ones as well.
Yeah. Yeah, just there's so much I'm hopeful for now. Like a lot of these indie things, I think we talked about this, when we weren't recording one time, but a lot of these smaller indie properties now, between this and The Boys, I've got a lot of hope. I've got more than I like to have.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm getting burned. I am getting burned out on comic book stuff. I just am. I can tell. I've watched things like Falcon and Winter Soldier or WandaVision, and they're not bad. And in fact, they have in some cases they have really strong, great episodes or sequences. But when I think about both of those shows, I don't care. And I watch both of them in their entirety, and I'm like, why don't I care? These are things I've always wanted to see. What is it? What is it that they're doing that's just hollow to me? And maybe there's a predictability that's bothering me. Maybe because we've had so much Marvel for so long. Maybe that's part of it. But I'm getting burned out, and so that was sort of the cool thing with Invincible is for whatever reason it felt refreshing. It felt
It
like
really did.
this is nice. This is something different. Yes, it's superheroes, but it's doing something different. So hopefully, Marvel's got a few more. I guess you could say experimental things coming up. Maybe they'll be more to my liking. But yeah, I'm getting burned out.
Well, and we talked about this before. I think a lot of it is not only are they just playing it safe, when they tell you verbatim that, well, these shows don't have anything to do with the cinematic universe, it takes all the weight and power away from those shows. Like you have these shows that seemingly are setting up a lot of things, but they're telling you point blank, nope, it's not. And we talked about it too, Brian. If they would have had their main characters set up cameos and focus on some new characters, I think that would have been great. It would have been a fantastic way to introduce, the Young Avengers or all these different characters. But instead, you go with the safe characters that we already know, and then tell us, well, these stories don't really matter. Only the movie universe matters. But
Yeah.
it makes it to where I don't care, and that's unfortunate because I used to care a lot, and now I just care far less.
It's to the point where I think I told you I was like, I might not even watch Loki week to week. It depends on how I'm in that mindset where it's like I might just wait for a couple episodes to hit and then watch them together. I don't feel that urgency uh, to watch like I did. Like used to, it was like, oh, I got I have to watch it as soon as it drops. And now with Marvel, I'm just like, I'll get to it. you know,
Yeah.
and it's weird because that was not the case before. Like I said, I've seen every single MCU film in theaters except one, and that one being Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was the only one I've not seen in theaters. I saw every single other one in theaters.
And I think that's the problem too, is that, like we've been through over 20 something Marvel movies, and now they're giving us shows that are following the same formula. And even WandaVision tried to be a little different, but in the end, in a lot of ways, we got the same formula. It's like, oh, you're fighting a mirror image of yourself, and they're doing all these tropes, and you have your quirky side characters and everything. Like, but hopefully Loki will be different enough, but if it's the same formula, but with just a little hint of quantum leap, yeah, I'd make it a little old.
Yeah, but that was the thing that was when I got to the end of Invincible, like I said, I got emotional at points, and I'm just like, this is what this stuff should be doing to me. I should be feeling something, and the fact that an animated series made me feel more than you know Falcon and Winter Soldier, or even Wanda had its moments. I can't deny it didn't have its moments that kicked you in the gut a little bit, but um, yeah, I need more stuff like this. I need more thinking outside of the box, and Amazon Prime is killing it right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's they've gone for a service that if it worked for all the other things that are bundled into Prime, I wouldn't have it, to something that I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get my money's worth. I'm seeing shows that I enjoy seeing. Like what they're giving me is certainly making the subscription feel worthwhile.
Yeah. I know we went off topic, but oh well. Anyone who listened this late, I'm assuming you're a fan. If you listen past 30 minutes, and we appreciate that. So yeah, that's our Invincible review. We trying to think what's the next sort of genre thing we're doing. I don't plan on doing the Bad Batch show. I do plan on watching the first episode. I don't think we're going to do reviews on it, but who knows? We'll see. Um, I will watch the first episode and see if I might not even watch the show depending on the first episode. But I know Larry's going to watch it.
I'm going to watch the whole thing.
So, but
I'm going to talk to you about it week to week, regardless.
well, that'll keep me up to date. Is there anything else you guys want to say regarding Invincible?
No, I can't think of another, without spoiling something. I can't think of anything else I could bring up.
Only that I'm excited about, what we said earlier, potentially happening for the Invincible universe, because I had a friend very excitedly while we were discussing the show over the phone and all the different characters that are here, and the fact that there was an interview with the creator of Savage Dragon recently that said, it's like, oh yeah, I know like my character pops into the book every now and then, and there are a few other Image Comics characters that do, and then the thought came to them, was like, what if we get Savage Dragon back? So I'm hoping things spin out of this, that we get other properties out of this, and that it continues to, like, seeing how rewarding taking a chance on these indie properties has been for Amazon, that we get more like this, that we get some of those odder properties.
Yeah, because I am at this point going to be pursuing Invincible merchandise. Like I want a hat or a shirt, or you know what I mean. Like that's something I want to rep. Be like, yeah, I love this show. Check it out. And I think we're going to start seeing that kind of stuff. This is a show that I also think, similar to The Boys. The Boys took a while to get really going in terms of popularity. People were discovering it over a large period of time. And I think Invincible is going to do the same. I think it wasn't trending as much because it was going up against Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think that might have hurt it a little bit because that was sort of grabbing all, that audience. But now I think people are going to be able to binge it, and you're going to have a lot of people pushing it and saying, hey, you need to check this show out. And I think it's going to start to build a, really big fan base, and Amazon's going to be looking at all these other indie things and be like, yeah, what else is there? We'll invest in it. But yeah, that's it. Anything else, guys?
No, sir.
I think that's all.
All right. We appreciate everyone listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.